All right, let's talk Kansas City Chiefs. This is a Chiefs team that's made a lot of really kind of quiet under the radar moves this offseason as they look to return back to winning championships. They're still one of the best teams in football, a clear title contender, and will be that way as long as number 15 is behind center. But to help 15 out and this entire roster out, the Chiefs recently made a really kind of smart under the radar move that not a lot of people are paying attention to, but I think it is a chance to pay big dividends for Kansas City, especially when it comes to a deep playoff run in the future. We'll get into that in just one second. But first, I'm Nick, that's Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, earlier this week, the Chiefs brought back a familiar face to really help out and add a key piece to this roster. We'll refresh everyone on the story, or if you hadn't heard it, we'll get you the information, but then we'll break down the data behind it on the other side. Let's jump into the report, courtesy of Pro Football Talk at NBC Sports. The Chiefs are bringing back a familiar face for their defense. Per Tom Pelissero of NFL Media, safety Mike Edwards is signing with Kansas City on a one-year deal. Edwards, 28, has spent most of his career with the Buccaneers and appeared in 5 games with 2 starts for the club in 2024. But he also played for the Chiefs in 2023, winning Super Bowl, not good at Roman numerals, 53 there. 58, excuse me. He recorded 51 tackles, 5 passes defended, and an interception for Kansas City that season. All right, so this seemed like, kind of a decent move, right? We're not expecting, of course, a starter, Mike Edwards, to be a starting safety for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? We're talking about Hicks, we're talking about Cook being the two guys leading the safety group for Kansas City in 2025. So this seems like a depth piece, which is there's nothing wrong with that, except not only did the Chiefs get a good depth piece, they got the best possible depth piece. Let's go into our chart here. And again, big Microsoft Excel channel. Love doing the data here. So here we compared Mike Edwards' 2024 stats versus the best possible backup safety. So we look at a best possible backup safety. I basically looked at the fact that there are 2 starting safeties on every single team. There are 32 teams, so 64 starting safeties. So the best possible backup safety would be the 65th best safety at every single one of the characteristics I've listed at the bottom there. Overall grade according to PFF according to PFF, coverage grade, run defense grade, and tackling grade. And you can see here that Mike Edwards' stats, according to PFF, are significantly better in every single one of those categories against the hypothetical best possible safety. He's better overall, better in coverage, better in run defense, and better in tackling. So if the Chiefs were looking to get a backup safety, a veteran, experienced Super Bowl champion backup safety, they got one in Mike Edwards, and this is a guy who is better than the best possible backup safety they could have created hypothetically. You're never going to create a perfect safety, a perfect backup safety, right? Because, you're just pulling the best at every single factor that I listed at the bottom there. But Edwards is even better than that best possible, that hypothetical dream backup safety, which is obviously a great move by Kansas City. But it gets even better than that because you're not only going to get the best possible backup safety, you're also getting a starting quality safety. So I compared Mike Edwards' PFF grade, if we go into the next chart here, against the average starting safety. Going back to my comment a minute ago about the fact, 2 starting safeties on a team, 32 teams, 64 starting safeties. So I looked at the 33rd ranked safety at each of those 4 categories: overall grade, coverage grade, run defense grade, and tackling grade. And you can see Mike Edwards in blue, the average starting safety in red there. And you can see Edwards matches up pretty favorably. Overall grade, neck and neck, Mike Edwards slightly ahead. Coverage grade, the average starting safety a little bit ahead, but it's pretty close. And Edwards is far better in run defense and tackling, as you can see on the screen there, the last 2 sections of the graph on the right. What does this mean? It means the Chiefs added a quality depth piece with championship experience, who's a veteran. That's really important if you're trying to make a title run, which the Chiefs obviously are, and they're going to be every single year going into the future here. But they got a guy who is essentially a starter quality player to be their 3rd safety. This is what wins you titles, right? People think it's the star players, the Chris Joneses, the Kelseys, the Mahomeses. People think it's coaching, the Andy Reids of the world and Spagnuolo. And obviously that's the top line. But really it's having these depth pieces. It's having your 3rd safety being better than a lot of teams' starting safeties. It's having backup defensive ends that could be starting defensive ends on other teams. It's having linebacking cores that are full of playmakers instead of just having one playmaker. This is what the Chiefs have done so well over the past few seasons, and moves like bringing Mike Edwards back will continue to allow this Kansas City team to have a lot of success in the future. And again, bringing a veteran with these numbers, championship pedigree, that will pay big dividends when it's time to win those big playoff games. All right, Myers, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this, but Chiefs fans, you first in the comment section below. Now that you've kind of gone through, we'll say, the first major phase of the offseason, we're getting closer and closer to the draft. How would you grade the Kansas City Chiefs' overall performance, their front office performance this offseason? Do you give them an A? You think they've done a great job? Are you giving them a C, maybe C plus? You're kind of taking a wait and see approach. Maybe you absolutely hate it and you think it's an F. Whatever it is, grade the Kansas City Chiefs front office offseason performance up to this point and just your general overall thoughts and put that in the comment section below. Really want to hear from you guys. But Mize, over to you now. What are your thoughts on this move and just really everything with the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting move for the Chiefs because we've seen a lot of teams around the league do something very similar to what the Chiefs are doing. A lot of really good teams, as far as having three safeties that are able to be on the field and be, like you said, a starting caliber safety. Have guys really allows you to free up certain people to do things. So I think that's another interesting option we could see here with the Chiefs team that does this a lot. Baltimore Ravens, they love to free up their star guys like Kyle Hamilton, allow them to roam around the field and do a lot of good things. And when I'm looking through the other players on this team, I'd be like, well, one thing they like to do is like scooch someone up in the box, have a safety play more of like a linebacker role, stop the run a little bit better, be good in that aspect. And I thought to myself, well, who would be the guy, Hicks or, the other chief safeties here, Cook, that could be that run stuffing safety that was really great at run defense. And I look at them both, and they're both okay. They're both very good overall, but they're okay in run defense. And you look at Mike Edwards, that's the guy. This is the guy that had an 87.3 run defense grade last year. He did a killer job in run defense for Buffalo. I think he's had some mediocre times in the past, but I think that's when you allow this guy to really focus on one specific thing, that's when he can get really, really good. So I think that's an interesting aspect we might see of a guy like Mike Edwards is really keying in on his ability to stop the run. And he did it over multiple games with Buffalo, with Tampa Bay. I think that was the key last year is this is a guy bounced around, did a lot of stuff. He's not necessarily playing like a ton of snaps at times. He did towards the end of the run with Tampa Bay, but this is a guy when he was freed up to do some really important things, he did a really great job. So I think this is the kind of player, these are the kind of moves the Chiefs need. It's like you said, we want them to, they're championship contenders still. Once you go to the Super Bowl last year, even though you lose, doesn't make you not a championship contender. This is still probably one of, if not the best team in all of football right now, just because of the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes effect that we have going on. It's going to be hard to stop them making late postseason runs because there's just some kind of magic. But if they can start to get guys and bring them in, have backup players, so to speak, the best backup players, the best rotational pieces, and start to make these kind of smart moves, the money's going to be tight going forward because there's some superstars on this team. People need to get paid. The money needs to be allocated in different places. But these are the type of moves I love to see from the Chiefs. Just getting under the radar guys, rotational pieces that are hyperly good at one specific task. Like have a guy that can't stop the run to save his life, but can maybe rush the passer like nobody else. Do some really good stuff in aspects like that. Those could be the moves that set the Chiefs apart going forward. I think we're starting to see that level of thinking. Well, we can't go out and pay, hundreds of millions of dollars for the best safety possible that we could get in free agency. Let's get the best backup possible we can and have our, round robin of safeties come out there and do some good stuff. So I think interesting move by the Chiefs. I think an interesting potential strategy. We'll have to see how they move it out onto the field and what we're able to see from it. I think this is something that could work. We've seen it work with other teams, and I really love this idea from the Chiefs.
Yeah, it's important to have positional flexibility. Bill Belichick with the Patriots dynasty made this famous, but there's sort of this convention that goes around in the media, right? That if you just get a star player, let's use the safety position as an example, you get the best free safety in football, and you have just maybe an average strong safety, and your third safety is a little bit below average. You just sit there and say, well, we added a superstar safety. We should be really good at the back end, right? Well, not necessarily. If you average out three guys, one guy's a star and two guys are below average, that's not a great average in terms of production. If you look at the safety position in aggregate, right? You're not throwing one guy out on the field, you're throwing 11, and you got to have the ability to throw different packages on defense. You brought up putting guys down in the box. You're talking about the Ravens, you're talking about the Bills, you're looking even the Eagles in the Super Bowl, right? A potential third time Super Bowl matchup. The Eagles are obviously not going anywhere. You need guys that can, be QB spies, that can line up in the box in third down situations, guys that can cover running backs out of the backfield, guys that can make plays on a Josh Allen, that have the speed and the run defensive capability and the tackling capability, like Edwards obviously does when you look at his stats, to make plays against guys like Lamar Jackson. You need to have that flexibility. There's a lot of teams in the NFL, and I understand why, right? They go out and spend a lot of money just to, well, we need to star. We need to get really, really good at this position. So we're just going to bring in a big name guy. And I understand it. It makes sense and it'll certainly make you better. But the reality is when you're a championship team, it's less about making your team better and more about figuring out matchups, figuring out how you're going to beat certain teams. Because the Chiefs are already good, right? You're a good football team. At a certain point, like you said, you're going to have to allocate cap dollars to your stars. So you have to figure out how to be efficient with your money. And I think the best way to do it is to bring in players that give you positional flexibility that can match up against your top competition. And this is nothing new. This is what smart teams have done going back years. But a lot of teams just, I think they fall out of that trap. I think they just get into the mindset. It's like, well, if we find a way to get another star player, a star tackle, a great defensive tackle, a good linebacker, a lockdown corner, a great safety, whatever it may be, that'll put us over the top. Well, it's one of those things, right? If you're losing to, let's say, the Baltimore Ravens every single year because Lamar Jackson is running wild, and you bring in, another tackle on offense, is that going to help you against Lamar Jackson in those games? No, of course not. But if you have to play Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, like the Chiefs may potentially do this season or going forward, if you have a safety like Edwards who could play down in the box, who's a great athlete, who can run and tackle, then it'll give you a chance to win that game or give you a much better chance, right? Same thing if they have to play Josh Allen or whoever, right, who has that kind of ability. And this is just what smart teams do, right? You look at the landscape around you, you look at the marketplace, you look at the competition, right? You don't act in a vacuum. There's a lot of teams, and I think a lot of people in the media that think every single team just sort of acts in a vacuum. They just, well, there's no competition, there's no one have to play, right? No, that's not how it works. You have to play other teams. Other teams do certain things really, really well. If you want to beat those teams, take away what they do well, right? That's another Bill Belichickism that is kind of common sense and cliche, but it's so true. The two top threats, I think, and I think most people would agree with this, in the AFC to Kansas City are the Buffalo Bills, mobile quarterback Josh Allen like to run, and the Baltimore Ravens, mobile quarterback Lamar Jackson likes to run. Bring in a guy, an athletic safety who can play in the box, who can tackle those guys while also covering running backs out of the backfield. You help mitigate one of your biggest risks, right? This is just smart roster management, looking at your marketplace, looking at the competition. Dumb teams, I think, try and figure out a way to, and I don't want to say dumb teams, that isn't fair. Teams that are, rebuilding and trying to figure things out, it's about getting your team better. It's about getting your roster better. The Raiders are a great example of this. The Raiders aren't trying to, I shouldn't say they aren't trying. Everyone realistically understands they're not going to win a title this season. So they're just trying to get better. They're just trying to become a more stable team, which their strategy, I think, is pretty good. But if you're already a good team, if you're already a title contending team, you should be figuring out how to beat the other title contending teams, not just trying to artificially make your team a little bit better. It's going to be hard to do that because you're already good. Matchups matter. This is what Bill Belichick understood much better than any other team during his era, and the Chiefs have that exact same mindset. This is why Steve Spagnuolo is so great. He's able to just put quarterbacks and talented players, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen at times, in very uncomfortable situations because it's about matchups. It's about winning those games when it comes right down to it. The Kansas City Chiefs have essentially turned the NFL postseason like the NBA postseason, where it's so much about matchups and things like that, and it's the right approach to take. And this signing of Mike Edwards is just another example of the Chiefs following this proven model. Will it result in them getting another Super Bowl title? Look, I don't know. There's a lot of things that can happen, injuries, of course. But when you have a team that's got a GM like Veach and a strategy like the Chiefs do, the future will always be bright because they're making the right moves, the smart moves. It's not the headline grabbers, but it's the right strategy to win playoff games, and that's what this business is all about.